metabolic issues, autoimmune, gut, inflammation, hormonal issues. Body is going down pathways that it should not for regulating the HPA axis with 5, B6, B9, and B12. That is why having a regular bowel movement every day is incredibly important for your hormonal health. Hello guys, welcome back to another video. As always, I am so excited to have you guys here. I'm excited. Today we're doing a Q&A. I have a love-hate relationship with Q&A. I love answering your guys' questions, but you know that everything in the body is interconnected and it's really hard for me to give concise answers without going down on long tangents. So with that being said, I'm going to try and keep all the answers as informative as possible, but also as concise and relevant. I did do a poll on my Instagram and here on YouTube, so I got a bunch of questions. I don't think I'm going to have time to answer all of them, but I'm going to get through as many as I can. There were also some questions that were very similar to others, so I kind of grouped them in together. If you guys see me looking down, it's because I'm looking at my notes that I made on my computer. And of course, as I'm answering these questions, if you have follow-up questions, which I'm sure you will, definitely pop them in the chat box down below. Maybe I'll even do a follow-up to this Q&A. I always find when I'm learning new topics, I will have more questions than when I started. Lately, I've been obsessed with this diagram that illustrates the Van-Kruger effect, which is basically explaining that when you first start to learn a lot of knowledge, your confidence peaks really early on and you feel like you know a ton. And then as you continue to learn more and more about the topic, your confidence actually drops because you realize how complex the topic is and how much you actually don't know. And this is especially true when we're learning about health, how the human body works, nutrition, lifestyle, all of those things. I even feel this. I have been studying health and the human body and biology for over 10 years at this point. I did my undergrad as a Bachelor of Science with a major in psychology, a minor in nutrition, and then I have 4 years in naturopathic medical school. Plus, I'm now in my 3rd year of clinical practice. So like I said, over 10 years, and sometimes I still feel like I'm at the tip, but I'm rambling, so let's just get into the video. Okay, so the first question that I got was, can you explain how the nervous system works, also relating nutrition to anxiety? You guys know I love to talk about the nervous system. So again, let's do a brief overview of the autonomic nervous system, which controls all the automatic functions in our body, like our heart rate, blood pressure, digestive function, blood flow to different organs. So in that system, we have the parasympathetic and our sympathetic. Parasympathetic is our rest and digest. This is when we have blood flow to digestive organs. We have more stomach acid. We have peristalsis. This is also when we have tissue repair, so our body can actually heal. This is where we can get into deep and restful restorative sleep. And then we have our sympathetic nervous system. Our sympathetic nervous system is our fight, flight. This is activated when we are in a stressed state. It's really important to remember also that humans have evolved to deal with mainly physical stressors. If you look up until very recently in our history, most of our threats to our survival and safety were physical. So when we are in this sympathetic response, our body basically gets us ready to deal with some sort of physical stressor. So we have increased blood flow to our muscles. It diverts it away from our digestive organs to our muscles. We have increased blood pressure. We have increased heart rate. Our pupils dilate. We are like ready to take on some sort of physical stressor. Unfortunately, today, most of the stressors that we interact with are mental emotional, right? They're like stressful emails from our boss, our kid yelling at us, family conflict, interpersonal, or we're just not feeling safe. I think that a lot of people don't realize how big of a role feeling safe in your environment, feeling safe and secure in your body plays in your nervous system. Again, I'm getting off track, but like I said, the sympathetic nervous system is really there to help us deal with an immediate stressor. Now, like I said, we're really designed to have some sort of physical stressor, and we're designed for that stressor to eventually go away and then for us to move back into the parasympathetic. That's what I'm really talking about when I say creating a flexible nervous system, is that you're able to move out of the sympathetic back into the parasympathetic quite easily. Because the goal is to never be stressed or never have an inconvenience or a setback or a stressor in your life. One, that's not realistic, and 2, that's not good for us. As the human body, we need to be challenged both mentally and physically. We need to be challenged with setbacks, stressors. We need to be challenged physically with exercise and working out and strength training, but we want to be able to move ourselves back into the parasympathetic. And there's 2 big things that we really struggle with in the modern world. One, we just have these constant stressors come up, like the lion, the tiger, the physical threat. It never goes away. There's always another email. There's always another interpersonal conflict. There's always always another news headline that comes up and activates that sympathetic nervous system. So that's the first problem. And then the second problem is that a lot of us are just not very good at moving ourselves back into the parasympathetic. There's a ton of ways that you can do that. I post on my Instagram all the time about nervous system regulation techniques, but like breathwork, movement, vagal nerve stimulation, all of those can be really, really good. Again, trying not to get too off topic, but these nervous systems are all controlled by neurotransmitters and hormones, right? So when we perceive a threat or perceive a stressor, because it all starts with perception in our brain communicates to our adrenal glands through something called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis or the HPA axis. We also have the limbic system, which does play a role in the autonomic nervous system, but it's more so involved in memory, emotions, and behaviors. So for sake of time and conciseness in this video, I'm not going to get into that, but that is a very broad overview of the nervous system. So how does this relate to nutrition? I'm so glad you asked, because there's a lot of ways that our nervous system and nutrition are interconnected. I'm going to break them down into 3 categories. We're going to talk about blood sugar. We're going to talk about the gut microbiome, because nutrition plays a large role in that. And we're going to talk about nutrient deficiencies and raw materials. Okay, so blood sugar. This is my bread and butter. I love talking about blood sugar and insulin. It plays a huge role in the nervous system. In a lot of my nervous system cases, blood sugar regulation and insulin sensitivity does come up. Both high blood sugar and low blood sugar can trigger that sympathetic response. So even without some sort of external stressor, really high blood sugar or really low blood sugar can cause a sympathetic activation. And this makes sense. Anytime your body has something like blood sugar that needs to be tightly controlled, there are multiple mechanisms that will kick in when it is out of whack. So a really common one that I actually see in practice is patients' blood sugar dipping throughout the day. And one way that it brings the blood sugar back up is to release cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine to mobilize glycogen stores from the liver. That is one of the many things that cortisol does in the body. So if you're having your blood sugar dip throughout the day, it's going to increase cortisol. It's going to increase the blood sugar, but you're also going to get all those other effects of cortisol, anxiety, nervousness, tension, things like that. And of course, I talk about this all the time, but we know the basics of blood sugar regulation. It's including lots of fiber, adequate protein at your meals, utilizing things like resistant starch, post-meal walks, making sure that we're managing inflammation, because all of those are going to play a large role in insulin sensitivity and blood sugar. So let's talk about gut health now. You guys know I love chatting about gut health. It's so important. It's really involved in every system of the body. But of course, we know there is a very strong gut-brain connection. There's basic things like the fact that a lot of our serotonin, which is a very calming hormone, a lot of that is made in the gut because it's also related to peristalsis within the gut. But then we also see that imbalances in the gut microbiome or damages to the gut lining can be a major source of inflammation in the body. And whenever I'm looking at a nervous system case, an anxiety, depression case, inflammation is always coming up, because inflammation also impacts neurotransmitter synthesis, receptor activity, and breakdown. And if you guys want to learn more about inflammation, I made a whole inflammation carousel post on my Instagram. I always get questions about like what inflammation is, what does that term mean, what does anti-inflammatory mean? So I broke it all down there. I talk about actually what inflammation is, how to measure it, what are the common sources of inflammation, all of that kind of stuff. So you guys can go and look at that post. But coming back to the point, inflammation does play a huge role in how neurotransmitters are made, how they actually bind to receptors. Even if you have a set amount of neurotransmitters or hormones in the body, if they can't bind and interact with the receptors properly for some reason, you're not going to get the desired effect. So inflammation plays a role in that, and then it can also play a role in the breakdown of neurotransmitters. Again, trying not to get too much into the nitty-gritty. And again, if you guys want to go back and learn more about digestive health, you can go and watch the digestive health video, because I go over all the different ways that you can support a healthy gut microbiome. Okay, and then lastly is nutrition and raw materials. So I think that a lot of people overlook the importance of micronutrients for mental health and nervous system function, but there are a ton of micronutrients that are really, really important for, again, neurotransmitter synthesis. And then we also need things like amino acids, because they're going to be the precursors to those neurotransmitters. So I'm going to go through a few of them. Also keep in mind, a lot of these are going to be cofactors. So if we go back to grade grade 9 chemistry. Remember when we had the chemical reactions where you have input and then you have the arrow and then you have the final product, but you had those cofactors that weren't technically going into the beginning product or the end product. They were needed for the reaction to take place. So a lot of micronutrients act as cofactors for the synthesis of neurotransmitters. And again, whenever I say cofactor, just keep that in mind. Really quickly, I'm gonna just run through them. I wrote down all the ones that I just see come up a lot when I'm looking at a lot of diagrams, when I'm looking at a lot of pathways. So we have zinc, magnesium, the B vitamins, but especially B5, B6, B9, and B12, your omega-3s. And then we're also looking at a really good omega-3, omega-6, omega-9 ratio. Probably the most common one that you'll hear about is magnesium, right? Like magnesium is required for so many different reactions within the body, especially when we're making things like GABA and other calming neurotransmitters. The next ones that I see come up a lot are the B vitamins, especially B6. That's going to be really important for making serotonin, dopamine, GABA, also progesterone, which is going to be a calming hormone. And then it's really important to remember also that the raw materials for these are amino acids. Okay, and then one other nutrient that I am going to talk about is iron. Just because iron deficiency is something that needs to be ruled out in any anxiety case, just because iron is essential for hemoglobin production, and hemoglobin is what carries oxygen to tissue. So if you don't have enough iron and therefore you can't get enough oxygen to your tissue, including your brain, it can trigger a sympathetic and anxiety-like response. So something that you definitely want to look into as well. That was quite a long answer. I hope that helped. If you guys are looking for more information about nervous system, I feel like this is a good time to plug my upcoming program. I'm just going to do a shameless plug. So you guys are watching this on, I believe, Saturday the 15th. On Monday the 17th, doors are going to be opening for my Balance and Thrive program. I am so excited for this program. I have been wanting to launch a course for so long, but I've just keep putting it off. I think part of the perfectionist in me just kept trying to like kick it down the road, waiting for it to be perfect. But I've specifically designed this course based around metabolism and nervous system function, really breaking down what metabolism is, what we need for our metabolism to work properly, what hormones are related to our metabolism and how those impact its function, and then also the nervous system component and how nervous system and metabolism are intertwined and why so many of us are struggling with metabolism and nervous system issues. It's really born out of both my personal experience with my own health journey. I struggled for years and years with my health, and really focusing on my metabolic health and focusing on my nervous system is what really made the biggest difference when it came to my health. Just a little shameless plug, but I'm really excited for it because this is something that I've been wanting to do for a really, really long time. Let's move on to the next question. Favorite fermented foods and tips to incorporate them daily or weekly into your diet. In terms of fermented foods, I really stick to kimchi and sauerkraut. One, they're pretty affordable. They last a decent amount of time in my fridge, and I like that they have both pre and probiotics. I've tried kefir a few times and I just don't like the taste of it. And if I don't like the taste, I'm probably not going to eat it, and I don't really want to spend my money on it. In the summer, I really like to put sauerkraut in my salad. I find it's harder for me to eat it in the winter, so sometimes I'll just take a spoonful before my dinner. If you guys have any fermented foods that you'd love to incorporate and tips for how to incorporate them, drop them in the comments down below. This is going to be another long one, guys, but specific foods to assist in sex hormone production. So I'm assuming that you're talking about estrogen, progesterone, maybe DHEAS, but let's just do estrogen and progesterone. Let's start with progesterone. Now, with any hormones, cholesterol is the precursor to all the different sex hormones in the body. There's a lot of steps in between that. You're gonna need all those cofactors that we talked about before. So a really common one is B6. In fact, you know what? I'm not gonna list all the foods because I think that that's just gonna take too long. I'll go through the nutrients, and then what I would really recommend doing is going to the NIH website. They have an information page for every nutrient. So you can go and they have really nice tables with like sources, what the most common sources are, and how much is in a serving. I'm gonna go through the nutrients. If I can think off the top of my head of like foods where I'm like, wow, that's so high in that nutrient, I'll mention it. But otherwise, I'll go through the nutrients, and I would just recommend going to the NIH page. I'll link it down below too. Okay, the next one is going to be magnesium. Magnesium is involved in progesterone production, but it's also really important for regulating the HPA axis, which we talked about before, brain to the adrenals. And it's really important for modulating and keeping healthy cortisol levels. And we know that really high cortisol can drive down progesterone production. Magnesium is going to be really high in things like leafy greens, nuts, seeds, avocados, dark chocolate, beans and legumes. Zinc, again, that's going to come in. Zinc is really important for supporting ovulation. It's also really important for boosting FSH, or follicular stimulating hormone, which directly impacts progesterone synthesis. Another one is vitamin C. Vitamin C is going to be really important for progesterone production as well. You guys know I'm trying to really make an effort to incorporate more vitamin C in my diet. And then the last one is selenium. So selenium, it gets a lot of talk around thyroid. Of course, it is really important for thyroid function, and we know that proper thyroid function is really important for proper progesterone production as well. But my overall suggestions for supporting a healthy progesterone production is to manage stress, and we all know that that involves a lot of mindset work, to eat a micronutrient rich, diverse diet, get good sleep, sunlight, exercise, all of those kind of things. So that's progesterone. And then for estrogen, I mean, the micronutrients that are going to be needed are going to be pretty similar. And to be honest, bigger issue that I see with estrogen is that women have a hard time actually metabolizing and breaking down estrogen properly. Really common patterns that I tend to see is that high cortisol, low progesterone picture. Then in terms of estrogen, women of reproductive age, a lot of them are struggling to actually metabolize and excrete estrogen properly. So maybe let's talk about how we can support that through food. I'll do a brief overview of estrogen metabolism, but again, it's beyond the scope of this video. But estrogen is metabolized in the liver. There's phase 1 and phase 2 detox, and then mostly it gets packaged into bile, popped out into the digestive system through bile, and then we carry it out. That is why having a regular bowel movement every day is incredibly important for your hormonal health. Sorry, someone's just walking by my apartment like blasting music. In terms of phase 1 liver detoxification, nutrients that we need for that are, surprise, surprise, the B vitamins. So B2, B6, B9, and B12. You're also going to need magnesium and antioxidants like vitamin C, vitamin E, and selenium. We're just seeing the same micronutrients come up over and over again. And then phase 2 gets a little bit more interesting because this is when we start to see more phytochemicals come into play. This is where we start to say things like cruciferous vegetables can be really great because they have compounds like sulforaphanes, like DIM, like calcium D-glucarate that can help with metabolism and further breakdown of estrogen. Gonna need the B vitamins. They're still going to come up, but we also need things like choline and betaine. You guys know I love choline, really high in shiitake mushrooms and egg yolks. And then betaine is really high in beets. That's also why beets are often said to be great for the liver. And then sulforaphane or sulfur compounds are going to be really high in cruciferous vegetables. So that is all going to help support the liver in processing estrogen. Hopefully we have a really good digestive system and we have good bile flow into our gut. We want to make sure that we're having, again, a really healthy gut microbiome, a good digestive tract, so that we're having a regular bowel movement every day, that we have enough fiber to bind to all that bile to excrete the estrogen out of our body. But let's move on to the next question. So the next question was how to test and detox at home for heavy metals. Guys, I'm going to be honest, I don't test a lot of heavy metals in my practice. I do a lot of blood work. Like, I really think that we undervalue really comprehensive blood work. And again, if you guys are like, but my blood work always comes back normal when I run it with my GP. I think I made a Instagram post about that. So again, I'll pop that up somewhere around here. But a lot of the times it's because they're not running enough tests. They're not looking at the correct reference ranges, and because they're not interpreting it as a whole. So I would say like getting really comprehensive blood work, having someone sit down and go through it with you. Sometimes I will run a stool analysis or a GI test or an organic acids test in more of my tougher cases or autoimmune cases. But I just find like a lot of the times we don't have to go to heavy metal testing. And I would just say like make sure that you've done all the other basic testing to rule stuff out, because so often other stuff is coming up, right? Like so often it's blood sugar, inflammation, nutrient deficiencies, thyroid issues, like stuff like that I will often go to. Of course, if we've exhausted all of that, then we may go down the route of like, okay, is there heavy metal? Is there mold? Is there parasites? Like stuff like that. But so often really comprehensive blood work can really really, really help. The next question was, what kind of breath work do you recommend and what does it help with? So like I said earlier in the video, breath work can be incredibly helpful for moving us from that sympathetic to the parasympathetic because it can activate that vagal nerve. Most of us are not breathing enough throughout the day. And what I mean by that is a lot of us are taking shallow breaths throughout the day. We're mouth breathing. We're not actually getting enough air and oxygen into our bodies. I don't do a lot of really intense breath work. In fact, I find it quite stimulating and sometimes it can rile me up more than it will calm me down. So I really like to do things like box breathing. That's a 4-second inhale, a 4-second hold, a 4-second prolonged exhale, and a 4-second hold. We can do it all together right now. I do that 5 to 10 rounds a few times per day. I'll do that and I can feel the stress leaving my body. It's incredible. If I am coming out of a really stressful meeting and I know that my stress hormones are released and my blood sugar is probably high, I'll usually try and do something to utilize my blood sugar, go for a little walk or do some air squat, and then I'll try and do some breath work just to calm myself down. The next question was best ways to heal a fatty liver. Okay, so we're going to talk about liver again. I knew it would come up. I'm fascinated by the liver just because it's such an amazing organ because it's involved in so many systems within the body, plays a large role in digestion, for our metabolic health and regulating blood sugar. It's really important for hormonal health. We talked about the ways that it processes and breaks down estrogen. It's also really important for thyroid and thyroid conversion. It also plays a role in cholesterol and cholesterol synthesis and processing. So I always come back to blood sugar and insulin sensitivity are always going to be so important when controlling fatty liver. I know when we say fatty liver, the first thought in people's mind is fat. The reason why fat is depositing in there is because we're having too much glucose in the blood. That may be because of chronic stress, diet, insulin resistance. Like again, that's a whole other topic, but there's a whole host of reasons why we would have high sugar within the blood. When the body can't get that sugar into the cell, it's going to convert it into free fatty acids or triglycerides. And then the body needs to deposit that somewhere. It can deposit into adipose tissue or it can deposit it into organs like the liver. And then unfortunately, the liver can't work properly. Blood sugar regulation is going to be huge. And again, we've already talked about that. Getting enough fiber and adequate protein at meals, resistant starches can be helpful for that. Post-meal walks to help with glucose disposal, exercise, building muscle. Muscle is like your golden ticket for metabolic health, but also looking at like sleep and stress because we do know that those play a large role in metabolism and blood sugar control. When it comes to our diet, obviously we want to be eating a fiber-rich antioxidant diet. And then of course, removing other things that are going to be harmful to the liver. So alcohol, trying to reduce toxin exposure as much as you can, smoke exposure, whether that be smoking yourself or secondhand smoke. I'm going to put a really great diagram somewhere up around here about all the factors that can contribute to fatty liver and fatty liver progression. And then specific nutrients to focus on to help support liver health. Again, we have choline. You guys know I love choline. It's so important. It's really important for glutathione recycling as well, which we tend to see lower glutathione levels in fatty liver. Our omega-3 fatty acids, I already mentioned those. Vitamin E is going to be really important as well, and acetylcysteine. And then we also know antioxidants like resveratrol, quercetin, those can help. I would say if you're looking at starting any supplementation, I would just make sure that you're working one-on-one with someone. Okay, so this one is a mix of questions. I'd love any tips on avoiding overeating, eating nutritionally poor food as ways to deal with emotions. Okay, this topic is so near and dear to my heart because emotional eating and binge eating was such a big part of my own health journey. I think there's a few reasons why we do this. One, I don't think a lot of us have really good coping skills to deal with emotions. And I think that if you were raised in like 80s, 90s, 2000s, we just weren't taught a lot of coping skills. I even remember as a child, a lot of the times when you show emotion or you're really emotional, you were told to like calm down or that you were being a drama queen or just told to suppress your emotions instead of actually deal with them. If you're struggling with emotional eating, you have to learn non-food ways to deal with your emotions. And that can be really difficult and uncomfortable, but that's a huge part of it. I think also a lot of us go to emotional eating because we're craving that pleasure, dopamine, that safety that we're just not getting in our day-to-day life. So that's a larger conversation to have. I think a lot of us are struggling with a sense of safety, security, and stability. The world is a little bit crazy right now and it's hard to find that. And you kind of have to create that within yourself. They also asked, am I still working on building more white space into my day. I am, and I'm finding it very helpful. I do find that my best ideas, my most creative ideas, or my best realizations just pop into my mind when I have more white space. Any books I've been loving recently? Honestly, I've been in a huge reading slump ever since I read a bunch of romance Christmas books around Christmas. And since then, I've been in a really big fiction slump. So if you have any suggestions, I'd love to know. In terms of nonfiction books, I just finished The Mountain Is You. You Are the Mountain. I'll put a picture of it here. And I found that was really good. I also listened to the audiobook 10x is easier than 2x. That one was really, really great. Is dairy healthy or not? It causes hormonal issues in me, but it's an easy whole food protein source and I find it so confusing. Like anything with health and nutrition, I'm going to answer this with it depends. You guys know I eat dairy. There are patients where I'll pull dairy out of their diet, do gluten-free, dairy-free. You guys know I eat gluten and I eat dairy. I'm going to go through the most common times where I would pull it to give you guys a little bit of context. We'll start out with if there is a lot of gut issues causing inflammation within the body, which again, with the acne, well, you're saying hormonal issues. It may be hormonal acne. And in which case, like a lot of the times hormonal acne is inflammation and gut issues as well. So if there's a lot of gut issues, if there's dysbiosis, if there's intestinal permeability, sometimes pulling out more irritating foods like gluten and dairy can be helpful. And the way that I explain this to patients is if you have a cut on your hand, which the hand represents the gut lining. So if there's damage to the gut lining and you're rubbing sand on it all the time, it's never going to heal. Whereas if you have a healthy gut lining, no cut on your hand, and you rub sand on it, it's not really going to cause a lot of issues. The sand is the gluten and dairy, right? Like the sand is not the problem, but if there is damage to the gut lining, it's going to cause irritation, inflammation, and it can make hormonal conditions worse. So that's one time where I will pull out dairy. Another time is it is important to note that dairy can be quite stimulating to insulin. So if there is a lot of insulin issues, if there's PCOS, insulin resistance, stuff like that, sometimes we'll talk about either removing dairy or really pulling back on the dairy. And again, like the different types of dairy, the different actual proteins like casein, whey, those are all going to impact insulin differently. But long story short, it depends. Like that's why I don't like blanket statements like dairy is inflammatory, because it lacks nuance and it doesn't take into account what's going on in the person's body. This question I'm really, really excited for. I keep saying I'm excited for these questions. Your thoughts on orthorexia and health anxiety. When does healthy living go too far? As an ND, one of my biggest fears when starting practice was that patients would always be leaving my office with really restrictive diets. There's a large stereotype in our profession that we will often prescribe very restrictive diets, and that's something that's really scary for me. On the flip side, I also know that people are coming to me because they don't feel good, and my job is to help them feel better. My job is to help them get their body to a place where it's functioning properly. And I work with a lot of metabolic issues, autoimmune, gut, inflammation, hormonal issues. Body is going down pathways that it should not. And sometimes we have to be more strict with our diet, with our lifestyle, with looking at chemicals and toxins in our environment to actually allow our body to heal, right? Because it's one thing to cut out of food because someone on the internet told you that it was bad for you. That's not a great reason to. It's another thing to say no to a food because it elicits uncomfortable symptoms in your body. I go back to my own personal health journey. When I was really struggling with my health, when I was struggling with anxiety, depression, low mood, weight fluctuations, painful periods, constant gas bloating, like every time I ate, I would get super bloated. I had to sit down and be like, I have to be a lot more strict because right now my body is just not in a very good place. I was so sensitive to everything. And that's something I also see, that when people are really struggling with their health, they're very sensitive to everything. So there are times when you just have to be more strict with the health choices that you make. And I definitely felt that. The first few years of my health journey, I feel like I had to be a lot more stringent and strict. And now where I'm a place where I've really helped to support and heal my digestive tract, my nervous system is in a much better place, my metabolic function is in a much better place. Like all of those things are much better. I can be a lot more lax. And I think that's why we're seeing this pattern of health and wellness people coming out and being like, oh, now that I've had years of being on like a really strict diet and I've been really anal about getting my protein and my fiber and my micronutrients at like every single meal, now I can be a little bit more lax. And it's because when your body is functioning properly, it is a little bit more forgiving. So that's kind of like my one answer to it. I don't even know if that's a full answer. And then on the flip side, in terms of health anxiety, I think it's unfortunate that we live in a world where we are forced to worry about the chemicals in our household cleaning products. A really long time ago, ago, people didn't have to worry about that. You didn't have to worry about the pollution. You didn't have to worry about the additives in the food, the preservative, the chemicals in your makeup and your household products. Like, you didn't have to worry about that. Now, unfortunately, we do. And it's just kind of part of life if you want to be healthy. Biggest thing that I see is people like freaking out and being stressed about stuff that's outside of their control. Like, do the things, try and be mindful, reduce your toxin exposure, eat your antioxidants, sweat, support your natural detoxification pathways as much as you can. I think that's also important to note. Like, we're all really, really concerned about toxins. Yes, we have our detox pathways. They're probably overburdened, but there's a lot of things that we can do to help naturally support those. In short, it depends. It depends where you are in your healing journey. It depends where you are with your health. I think that my boyfriend's dog is like weeping in the background. I don't know if you guys can hear that. You know what? I'm just going to go check on her. Okay, go. Okay, sorry. She was just on the bed. Got one on cholesterol and one on weight loss and perimenopause. So I'm going to group these to get, oh my gosh, now she's drinking. She's still drinking and I'm really worried about this camera dying. So like I said, I got a question on cholesterol, specifically about the bad cholesterol, the LDL going up. There's a lot of reasons why cholesterol can change in perimenopause, but we do see that LDL tends to rise, and we do know that cardiovascular risk does go up for women during perimenopause and after menopause. There's other risk factors that determine your risk for cardiovascular disease, especially inflammation, because we know the actual health of the blood vessel lining is really important, and inflammation can play a large role in that. There's insulin resistance that can contribute to the LDL increasing. We tend to see thyroid function change sometimes in perimenopause. Low thyroid function can increase cholesterol, so we want to rule that out and make sure that that's not contributing to it. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that can contribute to cholesterol. Again, we're coming back to foundations and what we can do to actually support that. So making sure that you're getting enough fiber, getting enough soluble viscous fiber. We also want to take a look at saturated fat intake. Research really supports getting less than 10% of your calories from saturated fat. The weight gain in perimenopause, estrogen plays a role in metabolism and fat distribution. We know that there's changes in blood sugar, there's changes in thyroid function, there's changes in inflammation, there's changes in the gut microbiome. There's so many different factors. And like I said, it really just means that lifestyle is amplified in perimenopause. So we want to make sure that we're eating very balanced meals, lots of protein, lots of fiber. I do see that a lot of women respond well to slight changes in their macronutrient intake, focusing more on protein, exercising. Oh my goodness, I cannot overstate how important strength and resistance training is in perimenopause. Ideally, we're starting it early. Ideally, we're starting it in our 20s, 30s, and 40s. But it is incredibly important because, like I said, muscle mass is the golden ticket for metabolic health. So important for insulin sensitivity, blood sugar regulation, glucose disposal. It's also really important for actually helping to strengthen the bones. And we know that osteoporosis risk increases exercise. I can't stress that enough. I'm going to end it here. I feel like there might be follow-up questions. So pop your questions in the description box below. I'll try and answer them. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and I will see you in the next one. Oh, and if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. We would love to have you here every week. All right. Bye guys.